April 14th, 2025, Yavapai County, Arizona. The sun beat down on the dry, cracked soil of rural Arizona as Jennifer Allen adjusted the brim of her worn baseball cap and scanned the horizon. Their home sat just off a dusty trail north of Seligman, surrounded by miles of open land and scattered junipers. A place where silence was the norm, and where danger could creep in unnoticed. Her 2-year-old son, Bowden, had been playing just outside the porch that morning. It was a typical start to a quiet day on the ranch. Jennifer had turned her back for no more than 5 minutes to put fresh water out for the horses. When she came back, Bowden was gone. At first, she called his name casually, expecting him to emerge from behind the chicken coop or toddle back from where the dogs usually lay under the shade. But there was no answer, only wind and the distant hum of cicadas. Her heart dropped. Buford was no ordinary dog. A towering 160-pound mix of Great Pyrenees and Anatolian Shepherd, he had lived his whole life on the Allen Ranch. He was a livestock guardian by instinct, bred not to fetch or play, but to protect. His white coat was dusted with the red soil of the land, and his eyes, deep and calm, had seen coyotes, bobcats, and even a mountain lion or two. That morning, Buford had been lying in the shade of the barn, seemingly half asleep, his massive head resting on his paws. But when Bowden slipped past the fence line unnoticed, Buford rose silently and followed. Not many people knew this, but Buford had formed an unusual bond with the little boy. Ever since Bowden could walk, he would cling to Buford's thick fur for balance. At night, Buford would sometimes sneak into Bowden's room and sleep by the crib, like a ghost-white sentinel. When Jennifer realized Bowden was truly missing, panic surged through her. She screamed his name until her throat burned. Her husband, Mike, called 911. Within an hour, deputies from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office arrived, followed by search and rescue volunteers, dogs, and even a drone team. But out here, land is vast and time is short. Temperatures in April could swing from the high 80s during the day to the low 30s at night. Worse, the area was home to predators, and the Allen property bordered thick desert wilderness with uneven terrain, cliffs, and dry creek beds. Night was falling, and so was hope. What no one knew at that moment was that Bowden wasn't alone. Buford was with him. Tracks found by the search team the next morning told the story. Tiny toddler footprints, sometimes dragging through the dirt, followed by large paw prints. The unmistakable trail of Buford. A helicopter spotted movement near a grove of pinyon pines, but the terrain was too steep for landing. Deputies on foot hiked in with flashlights and radios, calling out. And then they saw it, a flash of white fur in the distance, moving slowly toward them. It was Buford. His coat was matted with burrs and dirt. His tongue hung from the side of his mouth, and his chest rose and fell with exhaustion. But his eyes were focused, and behind him, curled up beneath a tree, arms wrapped tightly around a tattered, stuffed fox, was Bowden, alive. Deputy Raul Mendoza was the first to reach them. He would later recall in interviews how Buford stood between him and the boy at first. Tired, yes, but still alert. The dog's body, massive and scarred by brush, was turned slightly sideways, as if shielding the child. "Easy, boy," Mendoza whispered, hands outstretched. Buford didn't growl, didn't bark. He simply stepped aside. And there, curled up beneath the low-hanging limbs of a twisted juniper, lay Bowden. His cheeks were scratched, his lips dry and cracked. But he was breathing. His tiny hands gripped the stuffed animal like it was life itself. The deputy dropped to his knees. "We've got him. He's alive." The radio crackled. and within moments, word had spread across the hills and valleys where volunteers had been searching all night. Cheers, prayers, tears, all released at once. Later, medical examiners estimated that Bowden had wandered over 2 miles from the Allen property. At just 2 years old, in socks and a light sweatshirt, he had survived a night that dipped to 37 degrees Fahrenheit. But survival wasn't an accident. It was Buford. Deputies noted how the dirt beneath the tree where Bowden had been found was packed down, evidence that Buford had laid curled around him. There were fresh claw marks in the tree bark above them, too, likely from a raccoon or perhaps even something bigger. Buford had kept the boy warm, had stayed awake, had likely stood guard the entire night. He wouldn't leave him, Jennifer would later say. That dog never once left his side. Bowden was airlifted to Flagstaff Medical Center for evaluation. He was dehydrated, scraped up, but in remarkably good condition. As the helicopter lifted into the air, Buford sat nearby on the dirt path, watching it disappear into the sky. He didn't bark, didn't chase. Instead, he lay down in the dust. When the Allens returned later that day, Buford was still there, at the edge of the property, waiting. By April 16th, the story had gone national. Miracle in the Arizona wilderness read headlines from New York to Los Angeles. But those who lived in Yavapai County knew it wasn't a miracle. It was Buford. Local news stations aired footage of the boy reunited with his parents. In one clip, Bowden is seen resting his cheek on Buford's shoulder as the giant dog licks his face, tail wagging gently. When asked what he remembered, Bowden didn't say much, just one sentence: "Buford kept me warm." In the days that followed, the Allen home was flooded with calls from news reporters, local animal shelters, even strangers, offering everything from donations to a lifetime supply of dog treats. But the Allens weren't looking for fame. They just wanted people to understand what Buford had done. To them, he wasn't a pet. He was family. And now, he was something more. A protector, a hero. Yavapai County Sheriff David Rhodes gave a statement to the press. "We believe this child would not have survived the night alone. Buford's actions were deliberate, instinctual, and without question, life-saving." At the sheriff's request, the department hosted a small ceremony for Buford. There was no grand stage, no flashing lights, just a gathering under the cottonwood trees outside the firehouse, with folding chairs and a handmade banner that read, "Thank you, Buford." Deputy Mendoza presented Buford with a large gold medal on a red ribbon, custom-made and heavy enough that it slipped sideways on his massive neck. The crowd laughed gently when the dog tried to bite it off, mistaking it for a toy. Bowden, now safely clutched in his mother's arms, clapped excitedly. Life on the ranch gradually returned to normal, though it would never be quite the same. Buford, still stoic as ever, resumed his place beside the livestock pens during the day and on the porch at night. But his behavior changed in subtle ways. He no longer let Bowden out of his sight. Wherever the boy went, even just to the mailbox, Buford followed. And if the toddler fell asleep in the grass, Buford would lie next to him, head raised, ears twitching with every distant sound. The Allens noticed how Bowden, once a curious but shy child, grew calmer in Buford's presence. He would whisper into the dog's ear, giggle when Buford sneezed, and trail his fingers through the thick fur on his back like it was a well-worn path. Buford never minded. A few national outlets picked up the story, a mention on Good Morning America, a write-up in the Arizona Republic. But in a news cycle filled with politics and tragedy, the tale of a child and his dog was quickly drowned out. That didn't matter to those who knew the truth. Local ranchers brought over fresh meat scraps. Children from the nearby elementary school sent hand-drawn cards showing Buford with a cape and crown. One elderly woman dropped off a handwritten letter, tears in her eyes, saying, "He reminded me of my own dog from the war years." That kind of loyalty, you don't see it anymore. Buford, as always, remained unimpressed. He seemed to prefer the quiet, the wind across the prairie, the lowing of cattle, the way Bowden's small hands patted his side as they sat in the dirt together. A week after the rescue, Mike Allen retraced the path that Bowden and Buford had taken. Guided by GPS coordinates from the sheriff's team and his own knowledge of the land, he followed the shallow footprints and paw marks that still remained in the soft clay. What he saw unsettled him. There were broken branches, some at odd angles, along a dry creek bed. Small tufts of white fur snagged on thorn bushes. In one spot, clear animal tracks, likely a mountain lion, came dangerously close to where Bowden had rested under the tree. Mike stood in silence, heart pounding. Buford had led his grandson through terrain that even seasoned hikers avoided. Cactus fields, dips in elevation, snake holes, sharp rocks. It was no simple path, and somehow the dog had chosen shelter. Not just any place to rest, but a small grove protected from wind, half hidden by dense shrubs, with just enough elevation to stay dry if it rained. Buford had decided. This wasn't luck, it was deliberate, and Mike knew it. Jennifer found herself waking up in the middle of the night, imagining what could have happened. Coyotes, cold. A simple fall. She'd go to Bowden's room, just to be sure he was there. And there he would be, curled against Buford, who now slept at the foot of the toddler's bed as if it were his post. No command had been given. Buford had simply chosen to remain on watch. A neighbor, an old cowboy named Hank, who rarely spoke more than a few words at a time, summed it up best. That dog didn't just follow the boy, he protected him like blood. That's not training. That's soul. The Allen family began to speak at local schools and events about safety, responsibility, and the incredible loyalty of working dogs. Jennifer emphasized that Buford wasn't just a pet. He was a guardian bred for centuries to protect, to make decisions, to stand between danger and the herd. He just chose Bowden as his herd, she often said. The story reached the National Livestock Guardian Association, and they featured Buford in their quarterly magazine. Not for fame, but as a reminder that working dogs, often overlooked or misunderstood, play a role far deeper than companionship. They are instinct, memory, devotion passed down in muscle and marrow. Some in the community began petitioning for Buford to receive a National Animal Hero Award. After all, there were military dogs with honors, police canines with medals. Why not a ranch dog who braved the wilderness for a child? But Mike Allen declined the attention. He doesn't need a medal, he said. He already got what he wanted, his boy back. As the weeks turned into months, something in Bowden changed. His speech, once scattered and limited to a few words, began to grow. Therapists who had previously recommended language development sessions noticed improvements. Confidence, curiosity, calmness. Much of it, Jennifer believed, came from Buford. They would watch Bowden crouch in the dirt with the dog, stacking stones or poking at beetles. He'd narrate what he saw, not to his parents, but to Buford. The dog would respond with gentle sighs, eye blinks, or a shift of his massive head. It was more than companionship. It was trust. Absolute and complete, and in Buford's steady gaze, Bowden found something children search for in a world that often feels too big: safety. One late summer evening, the Allen family was awoken by a deep, bellowing bark, Buford's alarm. Mike rushed out with a flashlight and rifle. There, in the far distance, was the unmistakable outline of a coyote. Two, actually, lurking near the edge of the fence line, sniffing. A reminder that danger, even months after the rescue, still prowled just beyond the light. Buford stood motionless, hackles raised, body between the house and the open land. It was a chilling reminder. This world was still wild, still capable of taking things if you let your guard down. And Buford had no intention of letting that happen again. By late autumn, Buford began to slow down. His steps, once firm and confident, now came with effort. His eyes clouded just slightly. The vet, a soft-spoken woman from Flagstaff named Dr. Lydia Warren, confirmed what the Allens had feared: early arthritis, possibly the first signs of kidney strain. Buford had never been a young dog. He was nearly 10 by then, and 10, for a dog his size and breed, was old. Bowden didn't understand at first. He only knew that Buford didn't want to play as long, or chase shadows in the yard like he used to. But every morning, without fail, Buford was there, sitting by the back door, waiting for his boy to wake up. By Christmas, neighbors dropped off framed prints of Buford and Bowden together. One in particular became a centerpiece above the fireplace, the boy asleep in the grass, clutching Buford like a pillow, the dog's head lifted as if standing guard over the world. Mike built a new doghouse outside, insulated and wide enough for Buford to stretch his full length. But Buford never used it. He slept inside now, always near Bowden's room. It was early February 2025, an unusually cold morning for Arizona. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Bowden wandered into the kitchen in his flannel pajamas, dragging Buford's leash behind him. Outside, he mumbled sleepily. Jennifer smiled and reached for her coat. Buford had taken to needing help getting up in the mornings. His joints were stiff, and he no longer barked when someone knocked on the door, but he still wagged his tail when Bowden came close. But this morning, he didn't rise. Jennifer knelt beside him. "Buford," she whispered, stroking his thick white fur. He opened his eyes slowly, gave one soft exhale. His tail thumped once. She called Mike, then the vet. They carried Buford onto a thick wool blanket in the living room and waited. Dr. Lydia arrived just after noon. She examined Buford carefully, gently. Her hands moved with reverence across the dog's body, as if reading history written in muscle and bone. "I think he's tired," she said softly. Jennifer nodded. Mike didn't speak. Bowden, sensing the tension, curled up next to Buford, tucking himself into the dog's massive side. Buford rested his chin on the boy's shoulder, a final echo of the night they'd spent under the trees nearly a year ago. The family sat like that for hours. No phones, no noise, just the steady breath of a boy and the slowing breath of a dog. Buford passed quietly just before sunset. They buried him beneath the cottonwood tree at the back of the property, wrapped in the same blanket he'd been found with as a pup years before. Mike carved a wooden marker, Buford, guardian, friend, hero, 2016 to 2025. Neighbors came, ranchers, deputies, even Deputy Mendoza, who hadn't seen the family since the rescue, stood silent, hat in hand. Someone brought a small bouquet of white wildflowers. Another brought a framed picture of Bowden hugging Buford, taken the week before. No speeches were made. None were needed. The wind spoke enough. The house felt quieter after Buford was gone. Not just the absence of his heavy footsteps or the subtle way he'd push open the back screen door with his nose, but something deeper. Like a missing heartbeat. Bowden searched for him in the usual places, behind the barn, on the porch, near his bed. Each time he'd pause, as if expecting Buford to appear from around the corner with a low grunt and wagging tail. He didn't cry, not in the way adults do, but Jennifer saw it in the way he carried his stuffed fox everywhere again. The same one he'd clutched during that night in the wild. "He knows," Mike said one night. "He's grieving, just like we are." 3 weeks after Buford's passing, the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department reached out. They wanted to feature Buford in their community safety outreach program, Guardians of the County. They proposed creating a short video for school children and new parents, a reminder of how even in remote places, awareness and the unseen heroes around us can make the difference between life and death. Jennifer agreed on one condition, that it's not just about the rescue. It's about the years, the little things, the way he loved our boy. The project aired that spring. It featured real footage of the search, photos of Bowden and Buford, and interviews with the Allens. One moment stood out, an unscripted line from Jennifer. "Buford didn't just save our son. He taught us what it means to be present, to protect without question, to love without needing a reason." By March, wildflowers began blooming across the fields again. Bowden would visit the cottonwood tree where Buford was buried, place small stones in a circle around the marker, and sit there in silence. He'd talk sometimes, just in murmurs. Mike once overheard him say, "I'm okay, Buford. I miss you, but I'm okay." One morning, Bowden left his favorite truck toy at the foot of the grave. When Jennifer asked why, he simply replied, "In case he wants to play in heaven." Months passed. Life moved forward. But every now and then, late at night, Jennifer swore she heard it, that soft thump of paws on hardwood floors, a creak of the porch, the hush of breath beside Bowden's door. Nothing spooky, just familiar, as if loyalty once formed doesn't end. It just shifts to a quieter place. It was almost a year to the day since the rescue, when a neighbor, Carla Dunn, arrived at the Allens' doorstep with something bundled in her arms. A clumsy, oversized puppy with 2 big paws and ears that flopped over his face. "Wasn't sure if it was time," Carla said, hesitating. "But I thought of Bowden and Buford." Jennifer knelt and opened the blanket. The pup looked up with dark eyes and gave a high-pitched, uncertain bark. Bowden stepped forward slowly. He didn't smile, didn't rush. He crouched down, reached out, and laid one hand gently on the puppy's head. Then, finally, he whispered, "Hi." And that was all it took. They named him Birch. Not Buford II, not Buddy, just Birch. A new name for a new life. Birch didn't try to fill Buford's shoes. He chewed them instead, along with every corner of the rug, 2 couch cushions, and a suspicious amount of socks. But in time, he began to follow Bowden too. Not as a guardian yet, but as a student, watching, imitating, and sometimes Bowden would reach down without thinking and run his hand over Birch's back, searching, perhaps, for a memory, or maybe for something more lasting. Jennifer knew, you don't replace a dog like Buford. You honor him. And Birch, messy and full of energy, was doing just that. A year later, the family attended a small town fair. The sheriff's booth had a photo of Buford framed on the table, along with the headline, "The Dog Who Waited All Night." Kids pointed. Some recognized the story. A few asked, "Is that the dog who saved the boy?" Bowden looked up at his parents. "Yes," Jennifer said, "that's him." And for the first time, Bowden smiled. Not sadly, not with loss, but with pride. That evening, as stars appeared over the Arizona plains and a breeze rustled the high grass, Birch lay curled beside the back door. Bowden, now 4, sat beside him, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Mike and Jennifer watched from the porch steps, arms wrapped around each other. A life had been saved. A bond had been formed. And though the dog who made it possible was gone, his presence had never really left. It lived in the quiet, in the calm, in the lessons taught by an animal who never asked for attention, only the chance to protect. In the end, Buford's story wasn't about a single act of heroism. It was about consistency. It was about showing up every day in every season. About lying quietly beside a crib, chasing off coyotes in the dark, and choosing, when no one else was looking, to follow a toddler into the unknown. What he did that night in April 2025 was extraordinary. But who he was every day before and after, that's what made him unforgettable. Buford wasn't trained to save lives. He simply did it because it was in his nature. Because the boy was his, and there was no distance too far, no wilderness too wild that could come between them. Years later, Bowden would tell the story of that night to his own children. He wouldn't remember every detail, but he'd remember how warm Buford was, how his chest rose and fell like a mountain, how safe he felt, even when the trees groaned and the wind howled. And he'd tell them as they drifted to sleep. He waited with me all night. He never left. If you've made it to the end of this story, it means you believe in the quiet power of love. The kind that doesn't need words. The kind that's shown in actions, in silence, in unwavering presence. Buford's legacy is more than a tale of survival. It's a reminder that loyalty, when rooted in love, can endure the darkest night. So let this story live on. Share it with someone you care about. Like this video if it moved you. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear about the animal that changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe. More true stories like this one are coming soon. From the quiet ranchlands of Arizona to the hearts of everyone who hears his name. Buford lives on.